Alex Mozed. Thanks for joining us on Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle between large tech monopolies and traditional incumbents. Joined by Nick Johnson, co-author with me on the book Modern Monopolies. And so, of course, the first topic for us today is to talk about this Plaid acquisition. I just got back from the JP Morgan healthcare conference in San Francisco. That's why we didn't cover this, 3 days ago when this broke. Yep. But there's been a lot of chatter about it. And, I'd say...
Did they pay too much? Why did they buy them? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so let's just kind of break down what Plaid is, right? So Plaid think of them as the pipes to enable, if you're a fintech startup, if you want to build an app, a piece of software that relies upon getting access to the bank records, bank information, do transactions in and out of people's banks. These are the pipes that enable all of that to happen. So Venmo, if you send someone a Venmo and then they want to transfer it to their bank account, Venmo is using Plaid to integrate into a lot of the banks to enable that money to flow.
The same way that, for example, Stripe is used by a lot of app developers and websites to handle card payments. Basically, Plaid is used by a lot of these same folks to handle getting access to bank information and bank accounts. It's similar.
Mm-hmm. So I actually interviewed the two co-founders of Plaid, Will and Zach. When was this? June 2017. So 2.5 years ago. And said, Plaid is powering the future of banking and finance using its powerful APIs. Plaid is bridging financial institutions and data to innovative technology, making finance work faster and better. And what I was pushing the two founders on this was, well, you guys are a linear SaaS tool. The way Plaid makes money is, let's say you're Venmo, let's say you're these apps that are integrating into Plaid, you will pay a fee to Plaid to be able to use the software. But it's not a platform in the sense that they have a two-sided network effect, right? If you kind of think about who the consumer is, you could kind of say it's the bank, but it's not really the bank, right? Technically, the consumer is me sending Nick money through Venmo, but Plaid is powering the pipes for Nick to send that money back to his bank account.
Right.
The consumers that they speak about in their deck, where they say they have 200 million consumers. Where is this? Yeah, here. Accounts. They're referencing accounts linked to Plaid. So if we're using an app that then links to Plaid or is using Plaid to link to my bank account, they count that as a user. So it's a degree of separation between an actual end consumer and the then apps that are built on top of their technology.
Their customers that they sell to, the ones that pay them, are these apps and websites and things that use Plaid to connect into bank accounts.
Right. And you can see how they break this down. They've integrated with over 11,000 financial institutions. Here's the benefit to developers. So there might be now maybe a small fee for the financial institution, but I think where they're really making most of their money is on the developers. Now, how much money are they making to be bought for $5.3 billion? The estimates that I saw was that they're making about $150 million in revenue in 2019. So they've raised about $300 million. Yeah, $300 million. $150 million in revenue. That's over a 35x revenue multiple. That's expensive.
Yes.
Especially not for a platform company.
For a SaaS company, that's very expensive.
For a SaaS company, that's great money. Now, is that a bad acquisition? This slide I thought was pretty interesting. Where they show Plaid penetration, that's the orange. And then you can see basically there's not much orange and there's a lot of gray. That means they have a lot of growth in front of them, right? So could they keep up this growth and keep growing at a breakneck speed? I think they maybe 2 or 3x revenue year over year. So that's great. They have a lot of growth. Now, Visa buys them. let's talk about the origin story of Visa. Our friend Ben Thompson was talking a little bit about this. But what's douse us give us a little dosage of knowledge here, Nick.
Well, Visa back in the day, I think was actually called like Bank AmeriCard, and then only later did it become called Visa. But basically, how they started was this is back when there were a few card systems basically a lot of them were integrated and run by the big retailers. But if I'm a small retailer, I basically have one or two people in the back of my shop that handle small accounts that, they owe me $14 or whatever, and I extend credit to customers. And it was kind of a nightmare to deal with. What they did is they basically just mailed. So back then, they mailed physical cards to 60,000 people in this town of Fresno, California, where they started. And they basically went to these businesses and said, look, we're going to do this. Everyone's going to have a card. Will you join? And a lot of these businesses, the big ones that had their own cards, are like, well, get out of here. I do this. You're basically infringing on my value prop and territory. But a lot of the small ones were like, please do this. Let me get in and participate in this. And there was some skepticism, like, why would you join if you're going to pay? I think it was 6% was the fee back then. And it's because of all this back office cost that basically you're ripping out. I no longer have to deal with managing credit in $12, $14 amounts for all of my customers, because now you're going to handle all this for me. And it's easy to forget that today. When you think of why do credit card companies make money, it's because they take a lot of the complexity out of managing credit as a small business. I don't have to worry about it anymore. All I have to do is sign up and accept this card. So there's a lot of value there. And I think the interesting there, we talk a lot about how you build networks on the show. And Visa works with a lot of big banks and financial institutions today, but they started with this very much bottom-up approach. Let's start with these small merchants where we can deliver the most value that don't have the ability to handle credit effectively. And even with a relatively small network, we can deliver a ton of value to these folks.
And what was the part of it where there was, interstate bank transfers that they were also helping? Like, were they actually started as a nonprofit, or was that MasterCard?
They were both Visa and MasterCard were started basically by consortiums of banks, because back then I think the way banking charters worked, you could only work in particular states. So you don't have the massive national conglomerates that you did today. That came with deregulation much later. So they basically started as consortiums of banks that would own particular territories, so that when you use the card network wouldn't just be in like originally like one town or one state. You could use it as you traveled, basically by each bank owning part of this network and acquiring merchants.
Now that's the true origin story of Visa and MasterCard. I think the first story was the origin story of them having a credit card.
Right.
The true origin story of the organization of Bank AmeriCard, or whatever it was called, is that Visa and MasterCard were nonprofits created by a consortium of banks,
right,
primarily to get around interstate. So I'm a bank, I want to transfer money from one state to another. How could I bring all this connectivity together?
Right.
And that is where they got the bank-to-bank connectivity.
Right, because they were competing with Amexes and Diners Club and these kind of national that owned it themselves, and they went end to end, like issuing the credit. And the individual banks couldn't do that because they couldn't get this national reach. So they basically banded together to compete against the what was then the big guys to create this network.
So that, what? I'm willing to bet that's probably the oldest example of a traditional business spinning out a platform business. That's probably it. It's Visa and MasterCard. However many decades ago that was. And they've done phenomenally well. I think Visa's about $500 million in market cap, and their stock price has gone up over 200%. Yeah, they're at $430 billion in market cap. They've gone up over 200%, I think, just in the past 3 years. Yep, and they're doing very, very well for themselves. Al Kelly's the CEO. Met him at a few conferences. Pretty sharp guy. And I think this acquisition was a good one, even though they paid a phenomenal price. Let me give another example. A buddy of mine runs an MCA business. MCA just stands for Merchant Cash Advance. It's a fancy name so they don't get sued by the government for like usury charges, because they charge such high interest.
It's basically like payday loans for businesses.
Right.
Yeah.
And, in like, he won't like this, but, a few decades ago, they'd probably be called loan sharks. But these are more sophisticated loan sharks. Sorry, friend. And who gets their money from hedge funds. So it's sophisticated money and they do actually pretty good sized loans. But what he was telling me is that every single MCA business, which there's a lot of money in the MCA lending markets for small businesses that can't get credit or short-term loans from big banks, and the banks aren't that good at lending. They're very stingy. We've covered this many times. Every single one of them is built on top of Plaid.
Yeah.
And what do they do when they're built on top of Plaid? So now they've built software that, let's say I'm a small business, I want a loan, go to my buddy. And then they pull all your bank records through Plaid. It's some integration. They have software that integrates. Boom. You give them all your bank records. Now they can scan through, and the software will then scan through. Here are all the types of transactions. What were your daily averages? Did you ever go negative? What are, who's pulling from your account, and analyze the activity on your account. Then let's say they give you the loan. They will have daily pulls come out of your account for that amount. And all of that is facilitated by Plaid, right? So they're giving you access to the information. They're giving you controls, different types of controls that you can have on the account when you have this kind of lender relationship. So it's very interesting. And so pretty much you were saying this whole market is powered by Plaid.
No, they're not the only one. There are other companies that do this, like InvestNet, which owns Yodlee, which is similar. But Plaid is by far the leading one in the U.S., certainly. In this market, I think Yodlee tends to be more active internationally. But
Yodlee is
big.
Well, so let's get to that. So Yodlee is owned by a company called InvestNet. When did they acquire Yodlee? I don't know. Oh, and BlackRock has put a good chunk of money into InvestNet. But anyway, so they own Yodlee. InvestNet's a public company. InvestNet is worth about $3.9 billion. I bought some stock in InvestNet in the off chance that MasterCard wants to go buy them. And, this to me would be the natural play if someone else wanted to go and kind of hedge what Plaid is doing and go after this. But, I guess in Visa's shareholder presentation about why they bought this, they said, hey, look, we can help them expand their network. We can help them accelerate their sales cycle.
They have relationships. The way Visa's network works is they don't have direct relationships with end consumers. They have relationships with banks. Mm-hmm. So they have the bank relationships. So basically the banks issue cards to customers that will be very, very, very valuable to Plaid. And from Visa's point of view, they want to get into what are called non-card payments, which basically means you're not using a credit card. Mm-hmm. They have, along with MasterCard, basically a pretty unassailable network in card payments. But there's these huge volume of B2B payments. You're talking trillions of dollars that don't happen with credit cards. And both MasterCard and Visa have been investing heavily in trying to get more into these non-card payments, particularly in B2B, account-to-account payments, that kind of stuff. And this fits very squarely within that area of activity. Yep.
Now, I wonder, do you think, so the way that Visa, that the main part of Visa's business works is where they actually take a % of the money flowing through their systems, right? Which is the platform economics, right? So that's how you get all these rewards. So when you get like cash back or travel points and these kinds of things, that's because Visa is charging the merchant. And that's a sliding scale, but let's just call it 2% that they're charging the merchant. And then you get some of that 2% back to the consumer as a reward or cash back or something. And Visa's basically taking the difference. The banks get a little bit because the banks are also backstopping it. But net, what you can take away from that is that Visa's getting not just a SaaS fee, right? Which is, hey, I'm signing up, I get the software, and there's a fee associated with that. Visa's getting a percent of the throughput going through its pipes. So when Visa releases its earnings, they talk about how much dollars have been transacted through Visa's systems.
Right, GMV for them, basically.
That's essentially
gross
GMV.
Sales, gross merchandise volume.
Exactly. Right. And that is the platform dynamic which Visa has. That's why Visa and MasterCard and Amex are all in Plaid. But you do not hear Plaid talking about total amount of throughput. There's a revenue approximation in here.
Right. So
there's a number of clients in here.
The way they make money, basically, I think when they sign up users, these developers will pay them a fee. So when you give access to the bank account, but they also make a little bit of money basically every time you access that bank account. It's like a paper API kind of thing.
API calls,
right? Which if they're not capturing a percentage of money transferred via Plaid when they connect someone, they're basically, not to be pejoratively, but like the dumb pipes.
Yep.
They're the connection. They don't have the market power to take a percentage because they don't really have a network effect there.
No. And so this is exactly what I asked the co-founders 2.5 years ago. I said, hey guys, why don't you want to not be a pipe? Why don't you want to become a lending marketplace?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you want to say, create a marketplace for these MCAs to actually now, lend to small business? Why do you want to kind of go the next step and try and spin off marketplaces on top of these pipes? And they said, nope, we don't want to do that. We want to be honestly, I would even probably say they would call themselves dumb pipes and have no problem calling themselves dumb. They might have even called themselves dumb pipes 2.5 years ago.
How they're not threatening to banks.
They're right. They're not threatening to a bank. They just want to be the dumb pipes that power the system, and they're happy with that. And look, the founders are doing very fine.
Right. You can make a lot of money being the dumb pipes.
They can make a lot of money being the dumb pipes because they have the best pipes out there and the biggest pipes, at least in the United States, and that's worth $5.3 billion. And Visa will probably make and increase the value of that given their scale and reach and the ability to accelerate this business. So, and we'll see if Envestnet gets acquired as a result. As you were saying with Yodlee, having a strong presence in the US, but probably a stronger presence relative to Plaid internationally. So, interesting stuff. Now, what these credit card companies are also missing, which is a platform dynamic, is what's happening with Amazon Go. And so if you want to talk about another payment vertical, retail, a huge driver for credit card companies. And what is happening with retail? I mean, we're at 27th and Park in New York City. I'm not in California. For those of you on TikTok that just say that I'm in California and I'm the reason that AB5 is in effect, that's not true. I'm not in California. I'm in New York, which isn't much better. But anyway, no, I'm not there. Amazon Go has opened 3 blocks away from us at 24th and Park.
Yep.
And as we've spoken about previously on the show, we expect Amazon to open up, or they're actively pursuing other retailers and pursuing license arrangements with the retailers to say, hey, why don't you take our technology, use our systems, create a cashierless, no checkout lane experience in your store because consumers prefer it. And there's plenty of data to support that. They're opening hundreds and hundreds of stores. Not only is it more preferred by the consumer, A, B, it actually optimizes the square footage much more in the store, which can be sometimes 10%, sometimes more in terms of just checkout lanes and checkout machines.
Not to mention human capital costs.
And people to staff those machines, exactly. So it changes the economics of the layout of the store and the economics to man the machines. C, it also lowers your lossage and theft rates in the store because, hey, I took this thing off the shelf. The camera knows you took it. And so the other thing for grocery stores, for example, is that they have about 3% of lossage in their P&L, which could be theft, but it could also just be, hey, I took it off the shelf and I put it on another shelf. I didn't put it back where I got it, and the thing is a perishable, it's produce and it goes bad, and I got to throw it out now
because no one bought it when it was in the shampoo aisle.
Right. So 3%, by the way, for a grocery store already on razor thin margins is a very big deal. So Amazon Go, as we've spoken about, fundamentally changes the economics of retail. Not to mention giving a great 10x experience to the consumer, faster. If you're in a grocery store in New York City, you want to see the size and time it takes to go through those checkout lines. It can be like 20, 30 minutes. It's ridiculous.
Even
in
a Trader Joe's or any kind of very popular grocery store in New York, the lines can wrap around the store.
Yeah, they literally have someone with a sign saying, "Hey, the line starts, at the back end of the store. Come over here." So anyway, what needs to be created is a anti-Amazon Go alliance. This is just a sampling of a handful of tech companies that are building technology to be able to track what you're doing in a store, what items you're taking off a shelf. There's actually a number more. This is actually probably 6 months old research. There's actually a number more now. Some of these numbers have even gotten even bigger. Maybe we'll bring one of these founders on the show to talk to us about what they're doing. But there is an ample amount of tech startups out there building technology, maybe not as advanced as Amazon Go, but not too far off from what Amazon's been able to develop. It's not like Amazon had some kind of multi-year head start. I mean, maybe they had some cameras in their warehouses, but the cameras weren't being trained to say, what did you take off the shelf or these kinds of things in the same way that you would have in a consumer retail experience. And so, I mean, there's a bunch of OCR, image recognition technology. It's like I'm going through Delta to get on the plane and they're scanning my face. This technology, you can develop this technology. And that's what these startups are doing. Some have raised over $100 million.
Yep.
So this is what the Open Handset Alliance looks like for Android. This is a little dated in terms of all the players, but the point is you need an ecosystem approach, right? In order to do this. So if a MasterCard, a Visa, an Amex acquires one of the leading technology players with the image recognition, with the ability to say, hey, Alex, just pick this thing off the shelf. Let's add it to his cart and provide that technology. Then what you can do is you can build the other partners around this.
Right.
And I think that's what also Visa will bring to the table with Plaid is they can bring their network and their partners to the table. But you need partners that can integrate into the inventory management system that retailers have in the store. You
need sensors and hardware. And if I'm Visa or MasterCard, I'm not a hardware company, and I'm probably not going to become one anytime soon. The same way, if you have point of sale terminals, you have companies that can provide this technology and do it better. You basically want to build an ecosystem of these guys so that you can get your technology and software into these stores to be facilitating this cashier's checkout
accounting
experience.
Systems and payment systems and cash systems and all these kinds of things that a Visa, MasterCard, Amex, all platform companies and Plaid all have the ability to pull these kinds of partner relationships together. But someone needs to take the first step, make the investment that's needed, show that they're committed to building this ecosystem. And then what you can do is actually start to bring retailers along for the ride. Many, 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 many retailers need an alternative to Amazon Go. Literally, it's the last thing in the world that a retailer has in terms of data that Amazon doesn't have.
Right, the physical store space.
Right. What are people buying in my actual store? It's literally the last treasure trove of information that Amazon doesn't have. And they're starting to get it through Amazon Go. Right. But for other verticals that Amazon Go doesn't want to go create their own store in, which there's actually a lot.
Yep.
They want to go license the technology. But now if you're a retailer in that industry and you just say, I mean, come on. The last thing you want to do on the planet, probably on the planet next to some tragic loss of life or something is go and work with it and bring Amazon into your actual retail store.
It's probably up there with bungee jumping without a rope.
Right. Or that who's that tightrope walker who's going to do it over an active volcano. Maybe that would be up there as well. Or work with Amazon into your retail store.
You really don't want to let Amazon in. You don't want them getting a data. And the way Amazon wants to structure this, they want a cut of the transaction the same way you typically would for a payment provider that owns the network. If Amazon owns this network, you're going to be given a % of that, and they're going to be making a lot of money.
A lot of money. Oh, and you can bet that the Visa, MasterCard, Amex share in that, even if I am paying with one of their credit cards through my Amazon account.
Right.
That
once Amazon gets market power,
they're going to have plenty of leverage over that.
Right, so those swipe fees are going down.
Yeah, it's a real problem. No one has taken decisive action in the space. This to me is a no-brainer that absolutely has to be done. We'll see who wants to take that first leap. So let's see. We had a fun tweet from our buddy, Modest Proposal. I love his comment. So Yo is a platform company in the hospitality space in India.
Yep.
Got some big SoftBank money. And now what it says here, they are in full retreat in India alone. I mean, they're in other parts of Southeast Asia. Oyo has lost more than 65,000 rooms, or about a quarter of what it had offered to travelers previously. And this is just since October, this past few months. They've stopped selling rooms in more than 200 small Indian cities. They're laying off many employees and slashing a bunch of costs. Now, this is a platform company. It's kind of like Expedia, Booking.com of India, Southeast Asia. What went wrong here?
They've been struggling with, there's two sides, but one is kind of fraud and people putting up either fake inventory or low quality inventory and then kind of misrepresenting that. So people, I show up and I think I'm going to get a nice room and I'm staying in a hotel and it turns to be, like a little shack. People have posted stories about this kind of thing happening. The other issue that they've been having, which is why that number is shrinking in addition to getting rid of bad quality inventory, is they've been basically like withholding payments and accusations that they're not paying on time for a lot of these customers, these hotels and small kind of providers, and losing folks because they're not paying them, basically. So there's a lot of shenanigans, to put it lightly, going on there that has led to them basically retrenching. And they also laid off a bunch of employees, so they're not doing very well financially, which might have something to do with the payments issues. There's definitely some trouble there.
How you burn through. I mean, they raised $1.5 billion a year ago.
Yep.
I just don't know how you burn through that much money. I mean, that's impressive.
Go ask Adam from WeWork.
No, but this is India.
I know. The customer acquisition cost isn't quite the same. They're not buying a bunch of physical retail. It's
having $100 million in India is easily like being a billionaire in India. Maybe even having a few $1 billion in India, just in terms of the purchasing power of the dollar in these parts of the world. I mean, so $1.5 billion. It's a staggering amount of money. They'd raised $3.2 billion in aggregate. I mean, I'm sure they're not about to go belly up and they've got runway. Right. And this is a prudent decision to get out in front of it.
They've expanded too far, too fast, and it seems like they're retrenching. Yes. They've got to get their operations in order and not just be like growth at all costs. Let's get into every city. You've actually got to build your network in a way that makes economic sense.
In a sustainable and keep the quality at scale, which is hard to do. Yep. We've seen Airbnb come out with more restraints to keep quality supply strong, more checks on hosts, and some more checks on renters, consumers. But it's difficult to scale that fast, that aggressively. It was definitely fueled by SoftBank money. I don't think this company is the same degree of fall off, in the sense that this is actually a platform company that was raising money, probably at inflated multiples, but it actually was what it was purporting itself to be, which was a platform company. Whereas WeWork was raising, I don't know if they had platform multiples. They
had tech company multiples as a real estate company, basically.
They didn't have. Right. They had SaaS multiples. They didn't have Plaid SaaS multiples. Everyone wants Plaid SaaS multiples, but they had certainly SaaS multiples for real estate. Renting desk business,
and they were trying to sell themselves as a software and tech company.
On top of that, they were just burning through money, and then now you take literally a 90% haircut on your valuation, and you need more money, and that presents a pretty big problem.
Right. So it's not quite WeWork, but it's another case where basically just pouring capital into something doesn't necessarily help you build a sustainable business model.
Yep.
And even at a platform where there's value to being first and having a big network, you've got to do it in a way that's sustainable, and the unit economics make sense. If you just pour incentives into the system to get more customers and more hosts on, you're going to dilute the quality, and it's not going to work long term.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at this. This was a couple weeks ago. EU competition chief. This is Miss Vestager. We've spoken about Miss Vestager many times. Struggles to tame, quote, the dark side of big tech despite record fines. Okay. I don't know how she has the gall to call these companies the dark side.
Well, I think the gist of what she's saying here is that what they've done isn't working, and it hasn't created any effective change in the market power and dominance of these companies. She's basically like, well, they're entrenched monopolies. We find them, but it didn't really do anything.
This is a hoot. I mean, you got to read some of this stuff. Oh God. So when they fined Android, we've covered this in 2017, like $2 or $2.7 billion for forcing people to use Google apps when you had an Android phone. So in particular, Google Chrome as your browser. Oh, who got in trouble for that? Microsoft 20 years before. So, and we've spoken about that this was the right way to focus regulation, which was that when you restrict the supply side, when you constrain the supply side, that is where platforms can get into trouble. And that's an appropriate area for government to come in. Now, she's grumpy because what Google did is they introduced a preference menu, which offers users a choice of different browsers. And then they were also letting other competitive browsers pay for what position.
Right. They treated it like an auction, basically.
Yes, like a Google ad,
right?
Which it kind of is. But she did not like this. One of the very impressive competencies of Google as a company is their competence of making people make choices. Asked if she meant that Google would drive users towards its own product, she replied, "This is why it'll be very interesting to see how will such a menu of different options, how would that actually work?" You know, their biggest gripe is that they're not able to, put Google up on a stake and nail them to the stake, draw blood, fine them, win the fines, get the billions of dollars. I think they want more money out of these companies. I think that's how she's evaluated. I think her success is pretty much purely evaluated on how much money she wrings out of these companies.
Well, I think what she's saying here is a little bit more than that, which is basically the fines. Sure, they hurt in the sense that billions of dollars is never not going to be noticed, but you're not actually seeing these companies change their behavior in a meaningful way that makes you think they're afraid of more fines. They're complying with the rules in a minimal sense, and not from her point of view, I would say, the spirit of the rules, so that they're figuring ways around these, and basically, what is it like? Come at me, bro, is kind of their attitude.
I don't know. I think she's naive. I don't think she really understands. I don't think she's really taken, again, what we talk about on the show to heart, in the sense that you got to look at the supply side of things, right?
So you've got to look at the way they look, and you've seen this in all the things they put out on looking at the supply side. They also look at the supply side through the lens of impact on end customers.
Yeah,
they're not looking at the supply side as a customer group,
yes,
and the impact on the supply side directly as important, because basically if you look at a platform, two customer groups, consumers, producers. The producers are a customer group. They're looking at through the traditional linear lens the same way they would a Walmart, for example, and saying, oh, is Walmart's abusing their suppliers? Does that affect the prices and choices that end customers have? Which is the wrong way to look at this. It's producers are a customer group. What they're doing directly impacts the prices they charge producers, which they're gouging in many places. And we need to attack that directly, not indirectly, because it affects consumers.
Yeah, I know. They keep trying to go back to the consumer. They're like literally looking at the opportunity and the pain point right in the face, and then they say, "Oh yeah, you restrict supply. Oh, but let me go back to the consumer." They just can't get away from the consumer.
Right.
She can't appreciate the role that suppliers are customers, and that's all you got to do. Don't worry about the consumer. And you know what? The consumer is not harmed. I think that's the thing that she's like.
Right. That's why none of these things really stick
thorn in her
at
side.
the end of the day.
Yeah, it's the consumer doesn't care, Miss Vestager. You want to know who cares? The suppliers. It's the other search browsers that now have a shot. It's the other apps and websites that Google is continuously cramming down, forcing more ads, putting their own results above them on search. Why don't you look at that? Oh, no, because they need to look at the consumer. And then they give her another job. I mean, you can't make this up. So in addition to policing competition, Ms. Vestager has been given a new role as European Commission, wait for it, Executive Vice President for Digital, with a mission to boost technology in the region. They're asking the lady that's supposed to destroy the big tech monopolies to figure out how to go promote new technologies in the region. This is the lady who created GDPR, which is such a downer in terms of promoting competition in the region.
Right.
That is our next article.
It actually entrenched Google and Facebook because they complied easily. Lots of other businesses couldn't and died. And also, by the way, a lot of what it does is like affect what you can do with cookies and that kind of stuff, where people are tracking third-party tracking services basically across the web.
Yep.
But that's not a big issue for Google and Facebook because their main source of serving ads is the stuff you do on Google or on Facebook, which now nobody else can get access to.
Yep. We've said it before. Google and Facebook should be kissing the feet of Miss Vestager because she's actually, handed them basically the keys to the kingdom for digital advertising in Europe.
Right.
And this article, this was just this week, Google enhances privacy and perhaps itself at the same time. It basically is saying that GDPR and privacy regulation helps large tech monopolies. It's almost as if they've been listening to our show, Nick.
Maybe they like it so much they figured they'd do a little more themselves.
Maybe, now they're leading the charge on privacy, and not letting, and I guess Apple too, not letting the FBI get access to these iPhones, which we're going to cover tomorrow, and go more into that. But yeah, it's just it's so predictable, this stuff. But you'd think the people in charge who get paid, I don't know. I wonder what Miss Vestager's salary is. How much do you make? Any guesses? I wonder what her. Maybe I'll find it and we'll come back tomorrow with what her salary is. I guess $3 million. That's my guess.
That feels high.
Oh, I don't know. We'll see.
I think you overestimate the salaries of European elected officials.
Oh, I hope I am. I am.
But I think the point is that I would guess 400,000 euros.
Okay, that's the range. Okay,
but we will see.
It's like Nick's faith in the government and then my faith in the government. So let's see where.
Well, I think you can make the argument that even if it were 400,000. The person who's in that role should probably make a lot more than that because the people they're regulating make billions of dollars, and that would help you attract the right talent to actually do it, which is another challenge you've run into in other industries like financial regulation, where you make a heck of a lot more money in the industry than regulating, and you have this revolving door kind of issue that comes up there. So you're
saying she's actually not that good because we should get someone that's paid more? I'm going to find the salary.
I'm not going to go that far, but I am saying the kind of talent and people that understand this stuff on a deep issue, the kind of people that actually understand platforms, probably aren't taking that job for $400,000 a year.
Right. So we will see. I got it. But we're going to talk about it tomorrow. Okay. That'll be on tomorrow's show. And we're going to talk about how the Trump administration and the FBI have it wrong with trying to get Apple to unlock these iPhones. And so more on that tomorrow. Thanks for joining us today on Winner Take All.